I'm Jodi Barrows with the Square and a Square system, and in this short video I want to teach you how to cut your flying geese, but also how to know what size to make. You always want to know what size of square do I cut, what size of strips do I cut, so that my flying geese turn out to be the size that I'm looking for. Now, first of all, the reference book, Volume 1, the Square and a Square Technique reference book, to me is a necessity. You really need this book. It will just help increase the value of your ruler and help it be able to do more and make every quilt. Now, when you're looking at the patterns in the book, obviously they're going to tell you what sizes of squares and strips you need for the sizes of blocks or pattern that you're working with. But the other thing that is marvelous in the book are the charts. So if you go to page 34 in your reference book, you're going to have a flying goose chart. It will say option 3 flying geese. It will show the pictures of the flying geese, and then you're going to have 3 columns. So this chart is talking about flying geese. In the very first column, it says what is the sewn or finished size of flying goose that you're looking for. So you would run your finger across the chart, finding the size you want, and then just move horizontally to the middle column, and it tells you what size to cut the center square, and the last column will tell you what size to cut your strips. Now, the chart is very easy to work with, and we're going to come back to the chart, but let's go back and learn some basic quilting terms so that you can understand what you're looking for. So we want to know what size of square and strips for our flying geese. So let's back up to our flying geese. Now, if you are, of course, using our patterns, we're going to tell you what size you're looking for. But if you have another book or a magazine, or maybe you're just making some of your own things, there's a couple of things that you need to know. Okay, the flying goose is sewn. See, it's a flying goose. It's sewn, but it still has raw edges, so it is the larger size. And the larger size is called cut, raw, or unfinished. See, it's unfinished. It has unfinished edges. When you look at this flying goose here in this little quilt, all 4 sides are sewn in the quilt. There's no raw edges. So that would be a sewn or unfinished. There's always 2 terms that you're working with. Are you working with the cut, raw edge numbers, or are you working with the sewn, or what we call the finished? So some terms that people use for these is that, let's say that this one here that you're working with, it's a 3.5 inches cut this way, and it's 2 inches cut this way. So it's a cut 2 by 3.5. Or it's a sewn 1.5 by 3. So here you see the cut, and then in the quilt with all edges sewn, that is the sewn size. So see how it backs down basically 1/4 of an inch on all 4 sides. So 1/4 of an inch this way would turn it into a 3 instead of a 3.5, and the 1/4 of an inch this way would turn it into a 1.5 instead of a 2. Hopefully you can see the difference and what I'm trying to explain to you. So if you have a pattern and it's going to tell you to make flying geese, most of the patterns nowadays will tell you to cut a rectangle. So let's say you cut a rectangle and your pattern is going to tell you what size to cut it. So if you cut it 2 by 3 inches, and then you take a little square and put the little square on the side and sew down and trim those off, and then put the other square on the other side, sew and trim those off, then this is going to be a 2.5 by 3.5. Now, to use our charts, we would take that cut size of a 2 by 3.5, back it down to the sewn size, because that's what the chart is asking for. So on page 34 for your flying geese, the chart here is saying what is the sewn or finished size, and that would be the smaller measurement that you're working with. So once again, you would just come in here and find the size. Let's say you want a 2 by 4 sewn. That means it's a 2.5 by 4.5 with raw edges cut. Then your center square is going to be a 3 3/4, and the strips that you sew around it will be a 2 1/8 inches wide. This is always for the width of your strip, because of course the length is whatever the size of square you are that you're working with. Now let's go ahead and cut the flying goose. So if you need to know how to get your basic square, you can watch some of the other videos. But basically we start with the square in the middle and sew the strips on the side. I can do about 75 to 100 of these in an hour. I always tell my students that you can get anywhere from 24 to 48. So we do have a nice chain piecing method that's very speedy and accurate. So what I've done is I've taken the square and a square ruler and I put the 90 and I push it right into the corner of that square. I line my lines up. My line should go right through the point. Now when you look at flying geese, you can see how we have a 1/4 of an inch on these two opposite corners, and on these other two we have trimmed them up close or sharp. You can see that that's a sharp corner and a sharp corner when those have the 1/4 of an inch. So we're going to trim two opposite sides, putting the 90 right in the tip, lining it up over the seams through the grid. Make sure you're staying as square or even as possible. Now on these other two sides, we're going to put the 90 in the corner, but we're going to step it over two. We call it the Texas two-step because you're stepping over two lines. You're putting the tip of the line right in the tip of the square, going right down the seam. When you go back to the tip, look how you have a new grid line that goes through, and where you've already cut, you want to make sure that your block is staying as square as possible on the outside edge. So there's your sharp point. So what we're doing is we're creating a seam allowance in here and moving the points to make our flying geese. So this one we trimmed up sharp to the point. Now you'll come in here and cut it right through those sharp points, and you'll have two perfect flying geese. So if you wanted to do a star, of course you could go around all four corners and have your star, or if you wanted your traditional flying geese all going in a row, you can do that. You know that flying geese are in just about everything that you make, and they can be very mean, vicious little critters, but with the square and a square system, we take the bite out of it. So I hope you've enjoyed making flying geese today.